It's pretty clear that the coronavirus is on everybody's mind more than anything else that I can ever remember in the history of my life. I mean, I remember going to bed early on an election night because I was a little annoyed, and I remember all kinds of things. But I never remember a sustained situation like this, other than maybe that week that we lost power because of a hurricane, or certainly hurricanes that affected people who were actually in the storm. They dealt with this for a few weeks, but we may deal with this for a month or two in a way that is kind of unprecedented, because we're going to have nothing to do for a really long time. Which is why some of you are probably even here. We have, by the way, those of you watching at home, we have 10 people who are sinning by creating community with us. So but we spread out the chairs because they were not allowed to sit too close to each other for a reason. Anyway, with that in mind, and this was the only night in the history of our experience together where nobody was told to move forward or to sit closer together. Don't get used to it. We'll look forward to everybody's return someday soon, we hope. Anyway, one of the things that I have been very impressed with during this time is our governor, Mike DeWine, who jumped on board of preparations much sooner than other governors did. And as a result, he is trying, I think, to do his part to show true leadership in trying to get ahead of the contagion enough to make it so that the healthcare system does not get overwhelmed. And that's really the goal as I understand it. It's not going to really, we're not going to be able to eradicate the virus, but we are going to make it so that fewer fatalities could happen because there will be fewer people in need of significant medical care and thereby not overwhelm the system. That's the goal. A lot of people think the goal is that people aren't going to get sick. People are going to get sick, and if we knew that people were going to only get sick, we'd let them get sick and then they'd recover and we'd be done. But because the death rate of this particular illness is so much more than other flus and things like that, and there are certain populations at risk, we're doing something very unusual, which is we are closing down as much of the United States as we can in order to allow for this. Now, this happened at 9/11 for a couple days, maybe a week, but not like this, right? So we grounded people, but people were allowed to go to work and things like that. There was no imminent danger at 9/11. But this danger is really unknowable at the moment. People don't really get it. And as a result, I have some concern about what happens a week or two down the road. And what does the governor do when people start to get bored, when people start to have their idleness create depression and anxiety and the kinds of things that make people do things that are odd. Now, I'm sorry, but I was thinking this might be a huge leap, but it's really not. Let's look at this week's Torah portion and you'll see why. So this week's Torah portion is about the golden calf. It is the exact example about what happens when somebody goes up to a mountain and leaves a group leaderless with nothing to do. They build a golden calf. It says in the Torah portion, oh, you know what, I have it written here, I may as well read it. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, the people gathered against Aaron and said to him, "Come, make us a god who shall go before us. For that man Moses, who brought us from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him." Aaron said to them, "Take off the gold rings that are on your ears, the ears of your wives and sons and daughters, and bring them to me." And all the people took off so Aaron gave them something to do. There's a debate going on whether or not Aaron showed leadership or Aaron succumbed to the will of the people enough so that they could then build this golden calf. And it says, Aaron says, we'll worship God tomorrow, but they, in fact, worship a golden calf tomorrow. And that's really the question. Are we going to have leadership enough that people stay the course and put up with the boredom and the idleness? Or are they going to create other things? Are they going to make a decision that says getting sick is worth overwhelming the system because it's not worth being this bored? It's not worth having this little to do. So the governor said, don't gather in groups of more than 100. But the truth is we probably shouldn't be gathering unless we need to. And when we do gather, we have to keep our distance from each other and have social distancing happen, which is really counter to our sense of community here and the sense of community you have really anywhere. The idea that we're not going to hug and shake hands and that touching elbows is somehow okay doesn't feel right. And some people are throwing caution to the wind and they're hugging. But it's really not the right thing to do. And there's a part of me that keeps saying, well, why don't we plan on a movie morning for the kids and limit it to the first 20 or 25 that sign up? And we'll just spread them out and they can watch a movie here and at least change the scenery. Because it's really not a great idea. As much as those kinds of things are going to probably start happening anyway, it's a problem. And I am a little more sensitive in our community, our Jewish community, than other places because we've already become a little identifiable for having brought the contagion here. The APEC conference in Washington, D.C. provided for some first cases in some communities. I'm told that in the community in New York, between a Jewish day school and a bar mitzvah party, that whole community's closed down with the National Guard in. And then one of the first West Coast people, I'm told, that got off a cruise ship was also Jewish. Now, it was coming here anyway. It is not a Jewish situation, but you and I both know on the eve of the plot for America, or whatever that book by Roth is that starts on Monday night on HBO, that we get blamed for stuff that has nothing to do with us. I have no investment in HBO. That plug was just because it was a great book, The Plot Against America, right? Anyway, for all those reasons, we should be as hyper-vigilant at not spreading this as we can. I think the governor has been really very appropriate. I think that he runs the risk of people feeling like that somebody's taking too long to come down from the mountain. That is to say, if the governor takes too long to say what the next step is, how we get over the hump. In fact, it's literally getting over the hump. Let's go to that next slide, one more. Right, so I don't know if you all can see this, but this is the difference between what happens if you take no action, which is the darker line, and you can't really see. The lighter line goes like this. So as a result, the darker line means that a lot more people get sick, and a lot fewer people dramatically get sick after it reaches its peak. But the dotted line here, that dotted line is the line over which the healthcare system cannot function, right? So once we get to this point, the healthcare system doesn't function again until we get to this point. This is where people will die. If we do it this way, the way we've done it, it's likely that we will not overwhelm the healthcare system at all. And God only knows, because we've never done this before. But that's the theory. That's why schools are closed. That's why we're being told to socially distance, those kinds of things. There is a risk, because if we do nothing, people have a lot to do between caring for the sick and burying them. And if we stay a little more idle for a little while longer, we'll have less to do, but we'll also have less horror in our lives. That's the theory. Time will tell if that theory is working. But I do fear a little bit for what happens when people start to make decisions on their own because they've just had enough. And I think we all have to kind of look for that in ourselves. And as we do look for that in ourselves, we make good choices. So there's somebody who's very concerned about the fact that some of the soup kitchens and shelters are going to be closing down and not having enough food for people and things like that. And they said, shouldn't the synagogue get involved with that? We've been talking about this. They won't accept our food because it's the same reason why they're closing down. They certainly aren't going to accept our volunteers for the very same reason. So we as a clergy community had a call last night. We've been on the phone with each other all week, trying to figure out what are the best ways to model the behavior and to do the right thing, to do what we can to make it so that we get through this with the least amount of destruction to our institutions and each other. And it's a work in progress. And I am very encouraged because our governor has so far done a pretty good job in keeping us informed, in starting the process early, and in making it so that there is a dramatic approach to trying to keep the virus at bay enough to be able to treat those who get sick. Because there will be people who get sick, and it's not because they're irresponsible. It's just because that's what happens. And until there is a vaccine and a way to prevent it, we have to be careful. Last thing. We were talking in the lobby earlier about Tom and Rita Hanks, Wilson, whatever, and how they are in Australia, where Austin says it is summertime, which then makes the question be asked, is heat going to take care of this like it does the flu? And the answer is not in Australia. We'll have to see. So this week's Torah portion about the golden calf is not just about an event that may or may not have happened on Mount Sinai. It is about humanity and the way we humans are. It is remarkable to me how the Torah again and again shows insights to the way we live our lives each year with a new understanding of a timeless idea. We people don't do well without good leadership, and we don't do well when we have too much time on our hands without being given the purpose. So may it be that as we begin this journey of that we've never had before, that we do so with the grace and the care to not build a golden calf, but instead to support each other's good health so that we can be here again together as a big group as soon as we can. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.